The Pete Rose documentary on HBO Max. We are going to break it down a little bit and see what your thoughts on it were. So, initial thoughts on the Rose documentary, Harrison. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, full disclaimer, he bet on baseball. So he admits to betting on baseball. Is proof he bet on baseball. So before people say we don't know if he did, he did. He 100% bet on baseball. He bet on the
He
Reds like
admitted it.
56 times to win. He admitted it. Bet on his own team. Um, but back when I was high school, that's when his whole like apology tour started. He wrote the book My Prison Without Bars, which is a great book you should read if you haven't. So they had the whole big SI feature, and I feel like this documentary took a lot of what was in his book and a lot of what he talked about and kind of strung together the whole chronology of his career. And what's sad in all of this is that you see his career and what he meant to play. Like Mike Schmidt, who says like I wouldn't have been the player that I was without Pete pushing me. Like Pete made me the
Right.
player I was because I wasn't there yet. And what's sad in all this is that Pete Rose is such a genuine like ambassador and like one of the most knowledgeable baseball guys there is, who basically was a dirtbag off the field. He
Right.
hung out with bad people. He did bad things. He got into trouble. And when you surround yourself with people like that, that's what you get. I will say, when you look at his pattern of activities, he is clearly like a addictive personality disorder kind of guy. Like he gets into something and gets all the way into it. Um, Teammates loved him, opponents hated him. He hung out with bad people, made bad decisions, and that's why he's on the path that he's on. But um, it was a great documentary. I've always been of the belief that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. This didn't change that for me. What it made me realize that he really was like just a general dirtbag, but I don't think he knew and still doesn't know how big a dirtbag he was, because he clearly has addiction issues with gambling, with adrenaline rush, with all that stuff. He's a flawed man that put
Right.
up ridiculous stats, um, and belongs in the Hall of Fame, but he's not a good guy.
Yeah, for me, I watched it the whole time, and I'm like, he belongs in the hall. Like they break down his career, they show the games, the success he had, and I'm like, yep, belongs in the hall. Then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, no, no, he doesn't. And then another 10 minutes pass, I'm like, yep, he does. Like the whole time, I'm like, yep, no, yep,
So,
okay, no, yes, definitely. So me right now, I'm still on the fence. I really I want to go back and watch it again to make another decision. But no question on the field, what that guy brought to the field night in and night out was something special. I mean, no one played or even plays like that anymore. He was balls to the wall all the time, never stopped, sprinted everywhere. He would draw a walk and sprint to first base. No one does that. No one. He did. He brought something special to the game, which alone I think is Hall of Fame worthy. But as we know, the Hall of Fame is very, very big on character. And Pete Rose does not have the character to belong in the Hall. And that's where we sit. Now, my takeaway from it was in episode 4, he's trying to get reinstated into MLB. And this might be the only thing I agree with Rob Manfred on ever. Was Rob Manfred said his reinstatement to baseball has no impact on the Hall of Fame. They're two separate entities. I have to protect the integrity of the game. So if I like reinstating him or not does not affect what the Hall of Fame does, which I agree with to a point. But if he reinstates him into baseball, it's still I still think the Hall keeps him out because of that character clause that the Hall has. I don't know. I mean, it was a great documentary because I'm young enough that I was not able to see his performance on the field.
yeah, I was in diapers when
I
he
mean,
retired.
yeah, I mean, absolutely incredible what this guy did on the field. And like you said, Harrison, off the field, absolute scumbag.
Yeah,
I mean, and you can't deny that. And what really hurt him was the lies at the beginning. I think if he would have just came out at the beginning, said, "Yeah, I bet on baseball. I did it." I don't think we would still be sitting here today necessarily talking about it at this capacity. I think there would have been a little bit more leeway with him if he was just honest from the get-go. Now, he does bring up the Astros cheating scandal, which we can get into. We think that's way worse than what he did or not. Like you can draw your own conclusion there. But I don't know. I still don't know where to go with my decision if he's in or not. I don't think the Hall puts him in while he's alive, if he even gets in.
I don't think so either. But I just to go to your last point, if he came out at the beginning from when the allegations were brought on, right, and there was no lying, there was no any of that, and he had, mea culpa, like, I did it, I shouldn't have done it, I was caught up in it all, and he comes off as a sympathetic figure. And might he be in the Hall of Fame now? Maybe, maybe not, probably not, right? But we're having an entirely different conversation about Pete Rose. We are now having a conversation if that's how it played out, we would currently be having a conversation saying, Pete Rose, he made a mistake, right? Like, he made a mistake, sympathetic guy, like, look at all these other guys in baseball that have made mistakes and yada, yada, right? But now, because of just his brashness, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, but for lack of a better one, for his just kind of like pissing on your heads and telling you it's raining. And then when you finally like, no, Pete, it's not raining. He's then like, well, what are you making such a big deal about? Look at all these other people that have cheated, right? Like it's you come off so disingenuous, and you're just not a likable person when that's kind of the chronology of how it played out. So the act itself is one thing, but like if it was handled differently and it was much more of a, hey, like I did it, I got caught up in it, I shouldn't have done it. Do I think he's in the Hall? No, I still think they keep him out, but I think we're having an entirely different conversation because I think he would be looked at entirely different.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And Joe Morgan had lobbied the Veterans Committee to change the rule and get him in, and had a lot of support to do so because a lot of the players feel like he belongs in. And then that kind of faded away because Joe Morgan passed, which I continually forget that he died in 21, but
yeah.
There was a big rally to try to get Pete Rose in the Hall, and you had guys like Bench and Schmidt and Joe Morgan and Tony Perez like all going to bat for him. And there's a lot of kind of activity. Yeah. A lot of activity that kind of faded away because Joe Morgan was the vice chairman of the Hall of Fame and a very loud voice in the commissioner's office. And that all kind of faded. But when you watch the chain of events for Pete Rose, and I'm going to throw a little bit of a different perspective on this. And Pete even says it in the documentary, I've made more money not being in the Hall of Fame than if I was.
Yeah, which is crazy.
And this is a guy who is a master promoter. When his story falls out of the headlines, he puts it back. He applies for reinstatement. He does something. He shows up somewhere. But like, here's a guy who overshadowed the 2002 Hall of Fame inductions by releasing his book on the same day and signing autographs up the street. Like, he is a master promoter. He still makes, I think he said it's like about $3 million a year on card shows and autographs. People, he's got a website where he sells merch. You can make special requests. He signed like 1,000 baseballs that said, sorry, I bet on baseball, and signed him Pete Rose, the hit king, sold thousands of them. He's made more money by not being in the Hall of Fame, and he is a master promoter by continuing putting his story back out there. I do think he wants to be in the Hall, but I think for him, it's worked out really well for him not to be. And I think he's getting into his 80s and realizing like the window is closing. He's realizing like, I don't want to be the guy that gets in after they die. So I got to clean up my act. So all of a sudden, like, he stopped betting, like he's putting his life together because I think he made all the money. Now he's realizing like, okay, I got to protect my legacy now. And that window's closing for me. I don't actually think he's that heartbroken about not getting into the Hall. He's made a fortune off not being in there.
Yeah, it's fair. I don't know. He doesn't get in while he's alive. There's just no way that the Hall of Fame is going to take that chance, just like Barry Bonds. There's no way that they're going to elect them into the Hall of Fame while they're alive. and give them the chance to get up on that stage and badmouth the Hall.
Yeah.
Like there's no chance. Do they get in after they pass? Maybe 50, 60 years down the road, if we're all still here, that happens. But I don't know. I just don't see them budging at this point. Do I think the sentence is too harsh? Yeah. Pete Rose has done his time.
Yeah, 30 some odd years suspended.
He has done his time. There's no reason why he can't be reinstated into baseball. You have current players right now that have bet on baseball, and you just gave him a 1 year suspension.
Hmm.
Yes, you did ban one for life because he bet on his team. Okay, so you're consistent there. But that just happened this year.
But he was a nobody. Like, it's easy to ban a nobody for life.
Right. But Pete Rose has been banned for 38 years or however long it is, and he's put in his time. He's the all-time hit king. You're telling me that you're keeping out the all-time hit king and the all-time career home run leader out of your sports Hall of Fame? That is ridiculous. That would be like taking Michael Jordan and LeBron James when he's eligible, or Kobe Bryant out of the Basketball Hall of Fame. That's like taking Wayne Gretzky out of the Hockey Hall of Fame. That is asinine, and it's a joke. I don't care what the guys have done. Baseball, what they did on the field should get them into the Hall, no doubt. So right now, I'm changing my mind. Pete Rose should be in. I've just talked myself into it. Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. It's not. It's dumb that
The
you're
irony-
keeping the.
The irony is he's got a whole big display case dedicated to him and his career right in the Hall of Fame. Like, he's in the
Yeah.
Hall.
No, he's
just
in
no
the
plaque.
he's in the
Yeah,
museum.
he's in the museum, just no plaque.
He's not in the Hall.
Yep.
Yeah, he belongs in.
Well, I think who the hell are we? Three nobodies. But, I think a big kind of clue into how do I want to say this? So I've been saying for years, and this is just all Hall of Fames, right? Like I think it should be teammates, opponents, coaches, managers you were against, played for. Like, those should be the ones that decide, because they're the ones that know. Like, they're the ones that know. And I think it's a major clue in. You look at a lot of former players that played with, played against, and what are they saying? Right? I mean, you brought up Joe Morgan, you brought up those guys. I mean, what was their stance? I mean, it was a pretty clear stance that those guys had.
It was very strong. They want him in.
Right. So it's like, if they're like who am I? Like, I might not like that he didn't bet, but that he was, had a gambling addiction and this whole thing. I mean, that's been talked about forever. But I might not like it. But these guys that went to war with him or against him for the extended period of time that they did, and it doesn't bother them to the extent where they think he should be out. Like, to me, those opinions matter way more than some writers or ours. I mean, it gives us something to talk about, but I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, if you had a whole handful of players and it was like 50-50 or 60% no, 40% yes, then, I get the conversation. But like, the large majority of his teammates and opponents, I feel like, have this incredibly strong stance that, like, yeah, he should be in.
Yeah, they saw what he did every day and the difference he made.
I mean, to me, that tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly. And what's funny is, like, you look at the 99 All-Century team when Major League Baseball let him participate, he got the loudest, longest ovation of any player up there.
Yeah.
I mean, the fans are still very much supportive of him. There were several broadcasters they interviewed that were very supportive of him getting in. Brenneman and Visser and the guy from The Athletic, like, they kept talking to these broadcasters, like, yeah, he should be in. Like, he's paid the price. And it's a tragedy not to have him in there. And then Brenneman made an interesting comment, and I think he's right. His comment was, if Major League Baseball puts him in after he passes, it'll be the greatest travesty ever seen against a player, because this guy is so clearly a Hall of Famer, and then to carry this all the way out till after he dies and then let him in and not let him enjoy the fruits of his labor would be an incredibly sad moment.
Yeah. I have a Pete Rose memory burned into my, into my mind forever. And that was that Jim Gray interview at that 99 All-Star game when he asked him about the betting and all that stuff. And Pete Rose, I thought like he came across a little brash, but I agree with his comment. He's like, how dare you bring that up in such a celebratory moment? Like, I'm not here to talk about that. This is about the guys behind me. And at that point, I was like, okay, like, again, I was young enough to like, I was in high school and I was like, all right, like I knew a little bit about why he was out and all of that stuff. But I thought that was an appropriate answer for that time.
And what
Like,
year was that?
absolutely. That was the
99, the
All-Star
All-Century
at
team.
Fenway.
Oh, right. Okay. And then a handful of years later, he decided when it was other guys' celebratory night to get inducted into the Hall of Fame,
Yes.
he was going to release his book and hold something down. So I got you. Okay.
Yeah, no, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he is
Yeah.
the master promoter. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nobody.
Well, no, I mean, how dare Jim Gray bring it up
Yeah, I
when
know.
it's about other people? Let these guys have their night. This isn't about me. And then the exact same scenario happens,
Well,
what, 3 or 4 years later?
Yeah.
And it's all about Pete Rose.
Well, and what you learn throughout this whole thing is that Pete is a guy with tremendous charisma, and everybody likes him, and he's quite the talker, and he's smooth, and people like are attracted to him. But then like you listen to what he's saying, and you kind of read between the lines, and you're like, this guy is a total dirtbag, but people love him because he's exciting and fun, and he's got the aura of Pete Rose, but like he's a genuine dirtbag, and a lot of that is how he was raised, where he's from, and what he knew. But he also surrounded himself with terrible people.
I also go ahead.
Where were his teammates being like, dude, like you're going down a bad path, cut it out. And the hard part is like he left Cincinnati when all this was going on to go to Philadelphia, and like it all came with him. And he went to a new city where the only people he knew were his bad circle of friends, and it just got worse. That's when he started betting on baseball, and everything kind of went off the rails.
I said this to Sean before we came on, but you look at the elite players across all of sports, right? They all have that sort of like brashness, that, to use the word that Sean said, they all have that like weird personality quirk that makes them so great. And people don't tend to connect with those types of personalities, those type A personalities.
Yep.
Like it's hard to sometimes connect with them on a personal level, but their personality is why they're so great at what they do.
Well, it's like who's a bigger jerk than Ricky Henderson? Like one of the all-time jerks. Reggie Jackson, one of the all-time jerks. Fans love them.
Yeah. But I mean, even across all sports, I mean, you have like Michael Jordan and everything he went through. And like, I mean, it does span that like 1% of the top tier players just have a different type of personality that, an average person has a hard time connecting to. Yep. And I don't know.
For every Joey Votto, there's a Pete Rose.
Right. Or 3 Pete Roses. Yeah, agree.
And what I found interesting too is that, and I honestly didn't realize this, I guess, is that Giamatti died like 8 days after suspending Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they kind of had like an understanding of how this was all going to play out. And then all of a sudden Giamatti's dead. And Pete Rose was like, oh my goodness. Like I thought we kind of had a deal and an understanding. Now this guy's gone and the clock resets.
Yeah.
And I thought we had an understanding that I'd sit out for a year or two and come back. And the story's kind of, it's wild. Now, of course, that could be Pete making up stories because he's great at making up stories. But at the same time, it's like, what are the chances that he literally dies like a week after suspending him for life? And then, of course, what I mentioned to you guys, what I kind of didn't realize was that him on the ineligible list did not disqualify him from the Hall of Fame until the Hall of Fame changed their rule that wouldn't allow anybody on the ineligible list in, because they didn't want to deal with it. They wanted this to be MLB's problem. You guys made the decision. You banned him. You fix it. We're not going to be the ones that make that call and go against MLB. So they took the easy way out to basically put it back on MLB, saying, "Hey, if you're ineligible, you can't be inducted here." And that was also a twist that Pete never saw coming. He still thought the Hall of Fame was in reach, potentially through the Veterans Committee, until they slammed that door on him. And
it should be. It is the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's not the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right.
It's the Baseball Hall of Fame. So if you want to induct the best baseball player from, I don't know, Taiwan, they could, right? It's the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's not the American Baseball Hall of Fame. It's not the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. They are two separate things. So whatever the Major League Baseball front office does and what the Hall of Fame does doesn't have to be connected. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a wild story.
Yeah.
It is. If you haven't watched it, you need to. It's worth it. It's 4-hour-long episodes. It goes quick.
And you should read his book too, My Prison Without Bars. It's great, and he tells everything in that story in that book.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was really good for me to like go back and watch his career, like on the field career, because like I said, I'm young enough. I didn't get to see him play. It was absolutely remarkable what that guy did on a field. It was insane.
And the way he changed teams, like the
Yeah.
way he played, caused everybody else around him to be better.
Yeah, absolutely not.